A very warm welcome to my community. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. As always, I'm pleased that you have joined us. Last week we concluded a mini-series on the community of Brayton as presented by Hal Gollop. A thesis, in fact. Now, for those of you who are students of history and you're considering a research topic, perhaps you should give some thought to Brayton community. Hal Gollop presented a wealth of information on that community. Good primary research information. Now, this week, as we continue our journey throughout Barbadian communities, we have crossed the border from St. Philip into St. John. And here in College Savannah, you will learn how this community has fashioned, shaped, and influenced the life of John Goddard. It's over to you, Mr. Goddard.
Now, College Savannah consisted of rented land. Land was rented from the college estate, and villagers paid rent to the plantation. At the time I was born, and when I grew up in College Savannah in the early years, there were no more than 20-25 houses in the area. If you go to College Savannah now, you'll find a large number of houses. It is one of the biggest parts of the constituency right now. Now, my mother, who was a Goddard, I was part of the Goddard-Watson family. So the big families in College Savannah. My mother's father was the first entrepreneur in College Savannah. He, in fact, owned buses. That's how the villagers in the 1930s. He owned buses, he owned fishing boats, and he owned a casino, what was called a casino at the time, but it was a dance house. But they called it a casino. And that's where people went to dance. So he did have some property. He also owned a shop. The first shop in College Savannah was owned by my grandfather, Simeon Goddard. All right? So that is the family into which I was born in 1950. My mother said I was born at 3 o'clock when the bus rose the hill in College Savannah. So that is what she told me. Now, there were some prominent places in College Savannah which affected the lives of people, of course. The first I would want to talk about is the church. Now, St. Mark's Church stands on the cliff in College Savannah, and you can see from the churchyard, you can see, if you look north, you can see right down to Pico Tenerife. It's a beautiful sight. It was one of the two wall structures in College Savannah because all of the houses were chattel houses. But the church and the vicarage, at the time, there was no rector of St. Mark's. The rector was of St. John. St. John, the churches, other churches in St. John had vicars. So Canon Braffett was the first vicar I knew. And Canon Braffett reigned supreme in that area, that College Savannah area. Everybody respected Canon Braffett. It is true that the young boys referred to him as Big Boy when he wasn't around, but there was a lot of respect for Canon Braffett. Now, that church was there, and nearly everybody went to church. Some of the older men, of course, stopped after a period of time in there, but they insisted that they shouldn't go. So that I had to go to church 3 times per day, a Sunday. 7 or 10 o'clock in the morning, because the vicar of St. Mark was also the vicar of St. Catherine. So if St. Mark had a service at 7 this Sunday, St. Catherine had the 10 o'clock service, and it went the other way around. So I would have to go, and all of us boys and girls in College Savannah would go to church in the morning. We went back to Sunday school at 3 o'clock. Sometimes that irked me because, of course, there was cricket on Sussex Cricket Ground, which I'll talk about later. And I still had to go to Sunday school. And then we went back at 7 o'clock for evensong. So that was a kind of routine that we had every Sunday. Now, you'll be surprised, you wouldn't know about this, but Reverend William Braffett flogged the confirmation students. So you were on the confirmation class, and we used to have a large confirmation class, not like now. Sometimes there were 60, 70 children on the confirmation class. And Canon Braffett, of course, taught you the catechism, and you had to learn. You were given a book, and you would have to learn the catechism. And he would question you at confirmation class, Tuesday afternoon, Saturday morning. And if you couldn't answer, of course, he was not the most pleased person in the world. I recall one occasion, one of the boys who didn't know much about the catechism was asked the question, how old is God? And he didn't know the answer. And I was a wicked 10-year-old at the time, and I said to him, 1,000,000 years. And he shouted out 1,000,000 years, and Reverend Braffett asked him, who told you that? He said, John. And of course, that was the first time and last time I was flogged by Reverend Braffett. He became canon later, so sometimes I might refer to him as Canon Braffett. But that's who he was. The thing though is that he was very kind to all of us in the district. He knew every single person in the district. And of course the adjoining districts like Blades Hill, Three Houses Hill, Thicket, those people came to St. Mark's as well, Supers, Fortescue Hill. Because of course St. Mark's, St. College Savannah is bordered by Supers and Fortescue to the south, College to the west, and the Puff. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Puff, the famous Puff on the east, the far east of the district, and to the north is Concept Bay, which I will also talk about. Right, so Reverend Braffett was a gentleman for priests, and he cared about the parishioners. I would have to say that. Every year there was, of course, the traditional church excursion. I would think if crooks wanted to raid houses at that time, they could easily do it, because almost everybody went to the church excursion. The big baking up and the cooking up the night before or the early morning, and all of us went down to the excursion, of course, most often to the north of the island. So we would have gone to Archer's Bay, River Bay, Belle Plaine, those areas. The other sorts of activity that the church sponsored would have been a fair. Every year there was a fair on Whit Monday. Again, large numbers of people from all around came to that fair. And he didn't entertain dances, so the activity he had held very often at St. Mark's Boys' School in Blades Hill was what he called a social hop. It was a more, what I'm going to say, a sophisticated kind of dancing activity. Right, so those are the kinds of activities that he would have had. Of course, he lived in the vicarage, just under the church, and he had. Let me tell you what attracted us boys to the vicarage. There were several cherry trees which bore dark red. When the cherries were ripe, they were dark red, very tasty. And of course, there was an almond tree and grape trees. And we boys, especially the boys, would climb the trees and pick the fruit. Of course, you had to always look out for Reverend Braffett, because he could secretly and silently come under the tree and stand up and look at you. And so we knew that's what he would do. So, but the point is, we did pick a number of grapes and cherries, and as you would expect, boys to do. Now, I don't know if you know, but just under the hill from the church, there is a cave. It was called the Storm Cave, the Storm House, because in the 1831 and 1898 storm, people sheltered there. It is very secure. It was, at the time, it was very secure. Of course, it also attracted criminals on the loose. So fellows who escaped from Glendale at the time would hide there. In fact, in my own memory, there was an escaped prisoner who hid in there for a couple of months. Nobody knew he was there, even though my understanding was that he used to go down to College Savannah at the shop to buy cigarettes and that type of thing. But of course, nobody would know who he was. But he hid there. So it could hide criminals, and of course, as I said, it sheltered people from the hurricanes. We used to go there and play as well as boys. The girls wouldn't venture there, but the boys ventured in that area to play. So there was a lot around St. Mark's Church that would interest us, you see. Now, let me move to the shops in College Savannah. Now, everybody knows about shops. All the villages in Barbados would have shops. We didn't have a rum shop because it was rented land from the plantation, and you couldn't build a rum shop. But there were grocery shops. There was no supermarket in those days. There were grocery shops. When I was a boy, there were two. One was owned and managed by a gentleman called Teddy Antrobus. Then there was another one nearer to St. Mark's Church, which was owned by John and Mina Taylor. Those two shops supplied the villagers and the people from the surrounding areas, people from as far as Bayfield and Blade Sill and Fortescue came to those shops to purchase, or should I say, credit their groceries. Because of course, you know, at that time, money was scarce. College Savannah was a poor area. And people credited, or, as was said in those days, trust from the shop. The shopkeepers afforded credit until people were able to pay. Now, the majority of persons in College Savannah, when they wanted employment, they would find employment at Concert Bay, the fishing industry, or there would be laborers or cane cutters or truck drivers at the nearby plantations. Fortescue, Thicket, Palmers plantation, those were the main ones that they would work at. And of course, during the crop season, when money was flowing, in those days, of course, the Three-Houses factory ground a whole set of canes. The plantations had canes enough, not like as we have now, where there are hardly any canes around. Every plantation grew a large quantity of canes, and the residents of College Savannah also grew canes. So their canes were very often the plantations allowed the trucks to be used to draw canes from the residents to be taken to the factories. So during the crop season, of course, when money was flowing, people could pay, and what they had credited, then they would pay for in that crop season. Then, of course, came the hard times. And hard times for people in College Savannah were really hard. It was a period of time when the plantations would give you very little work. And then, of course, the people who fish would be better able to, well, of course, you know, the fishing season as well, would be better able to pay. But the shopkeepers afforded credit until people were able to pay. People supplemented their income, of course, by keeping livestock and growing their own crops in the plot of land that would have been rented. The children, like me, would have kept the kitchen gardens to help supplement the money which you get to go to school and so on. So the shops played a very important role, and God bless those shopkeepers of yesteryear. I think a number of people would have starved were it not for the shopkeepers, you know. Now, every shopkeeper in College Savannah had both shopkeepers in College Savannah had a car each. So there were only 3 cars in College Savannah when I was a child. 2 owned by the 2 shopkeepers and 1 by the priest. Reverend Braffett owned the car. He owned a motorbike before, and then he had a car. The 2 shopkeepers. All the rest of us would have to catch the bus, walk, or ride bicycle. In fact, some of the workers in College Savannah, those who managed to find work in Bridgetown, some of them rode bicycles to Bridgetown. You'll be surprised. My grandfather, my paternal grandfather, the only grandfather I know, because my maternal grandfather died before I was born, a year before I was born. He told me that he walked to town many a day, and he would leave home very early in the morning and walk to Bridgetown, and of course, walk back. Yeah, this is the kind of thing that they would have experienced. Now, College Savannah is, of course, near to Concept Bay. So let me just say a few words about Concept Bay. Now, Concept Bay was the center of existence, really, for us in College Savannah. Many people earned their living at sea. And even those of us who didn't go to sea, we didn't fish, we could profit from many of the fishes that would have been brought back to shore. In fact, many of the fishermen, once they left the beach and were on their way home, and they saw us boys gathered under the trees or wherever we were, they would throw a whole set of fish, 40, 50 flying fish for us. We would roast the flying fish with breadfruit, especially the yellow meat breadfruit, and there we could feed ourselves until we got home to eat. Let me say this at this point. College Savannah, the people in College Savannah were poor but not hungry, never hungry. There was always something to eat. Fish galore. In those days, the boats used to come in laden with flying fish or dolphin or shark or what have you. Then there would have been a lot of fruits in the area. So when the boys went playing cricket or whatever games and were hungry, they would simply go and raid some of the fruit trees. Right, so that is the kind of thing there. And of course, nearly every College Savannah person could swim. Well, you learn to swim from very early. I learned to swim at age 7. My father taught me to swim at age 7. So nearly all of us could. So I can't think of 4 boys in College Savannah at the time who couldn't swim. Right, so we would go there. We would also fish on the rocks, or when the jetty was built, because the jetty wasn't always there. When the jetty was built in the early 60s, we would go on the jetty and fish, or we would go on these rocks and fish. We would also go diving for and pick, we call it picking sea moss. You know sea moss. I don't know about the stuff that is sold in the supermarkets now, but I know about the real sea moss. We used to pick the sea moss, go home, clean the moss, put it out to dry, and then of course we made what we called at the time pap. We made sea moss pap. Very healthy, a sea moss drink. Very healthy beverage. And that is what we did. We also, from September to December, of course, you know, is the sea egg season. And we delighted in that. We would go to Concept Bay, and when the sea egg divers come in with their catch of sea eggs, we would help them break the sea eggs, the shells, and take out the sea egg roes and get them prepared for sale. All right, but of course we ate raw sea eggs all the time as we were going along. Sometimes the raw sea eggs gave you diarrhea later in the evening, but the point is that sea eggs were a delicacy, as they still are. But of course, I don't know if you've ever eaten sea eggs, but you can't get them. You never had any? No, well, you can't get them now. All right, the sea eggs have gone out of existence, it would seem, and that's why you know there's a closed season, and sometimes they allow you to go and pick a few, but very difficult to find them now. But at that time, sea eggs were available right through from September right down to December. I can't think of a time when you didn't find sea eggs. So Concept Bay provided a lot of not only economic activity, but it provided a lot of fun for us. That's where we went swimming and playing cricket on the beach, right at the water's edge. We played cricket there. Now, my uncle, first of all, my grandfather, Simeon Goddard, was also a boat builder. So he built sailboats at the time. Soon after, when I was growing up as a boy, there were first sailboats were around at the time, and then we switched to motor vessels. And my uncle built many of the boats at College Savannah, and for people at Martins Bay and St. John as well. He would take some time because he liked the drinks, and sometimes he wasn't available to work because, as he would say, he was tight, having taken too much alcohol. But people waited on him because he was brilliant in making boards. Not only in design, the beauty was there. He could build them, paint them well, and they were very seaworthy. You had no complaints about. His name was Alan Goddard, but he was called Techie by the people in the area. So yes, he was a great boat builder. He was, I think, the only one in College Savannah at the time I grew up. All right, so it provided employment for people. It provided opportunities for games and lots of fun. And of course, we all learned, as I said before, to swim at the beach. Well, let me move to Sussex Cricket Ground. That had a big influence on our lives because it is where we learned to play cricket and where we watched cricket. There was a team called Sussex, which came into existence in 1937. A great team, attracted some very good players, and Sussex won the BCL Cup in the division in which they played on several occasions. I was fortunate to captain the team in later years once I grew into an adult, and it was a great opportunity, and I cherish the time when I captained the team. But I played for the team, I captained it. So Sussex Cricket Ground was the place where people gravitated, to which people gravitated. Now, when cricket was being played at Sussex on Saturdays or Sundays, there were crowds of people around the cricket ground. Nowadays, you drive around, and even at Kensington Oval, people don't go to cricket. In my childhood, people gathered all around, and there was nowhere to sit, you know, except you're going to sit on the ground. But people gathered around, I mean both males and females. And of course, there were people who came around to sell. There was a gentleman called Beckles, who was a snowball man. He came to sell snowball. We boys would buy something called the Traveler. I don't know if you know what Traveler. Right. The Traveler was a snowball. He shaved the ice, put the dye and put it in your hand. You travel with it in your hand. The girls would bring their containers to get theirs because the girls didn't want to be seen. Very often their parents wouldn't want them to be seen taking a Traveler and traveling along the road. So they bought theirs and they put theirs in the container. But we loved the Traveler. So Beckles came and he sold snowball. Then there was a Sister Ennis who came to sell nuts, toffees, and different kinds of sweets and so on, sugar cake, what have you, bread, turnovers, and so on. Of course, BCL cricket clubs did not have a lunch time, so they were not the BCA. So people would buy their bread and so on from Sister Ennis. Right? But then, as I said, there were crowds of people, especially when Sussex was playing some of the big teams. And the big teams in my time would have been St. Catherine. It was not yet a BCA team. St. Catherine was an outstanding cricket team. There was Victoria, and there was also Society. Those were the three main ones. When Sussex was playing those, Sussex would be in trouble if they allowed one of those teams to beat them. Of course, every now and then the teams did beat us, Sussex, but those were the main. And when they were playing, crowds of people. So you can imagine when Sussex is playing St. Catherine, people from Bayfield, Marley Vale, all came down, walking, riding their bicycles, and so on, and gathered all around the cricket ground to see the cricket being played. So Sussex provided me with a lot of fun, pleasure, playing.
Thankfully, these are the stories of the Barbadian people that are today being recorded and shared with all of you, and certainly they will be preserved for future generations. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. This has been My Community. The program continues next week at the same time.